I am Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast, fresh ideas for business and personal growth. Today, my guest is Ean Price Murphy from Sacramento. You help creative entrepreneurs get at a glance clarity without all the spreadsheets to become permanently profitable. That's a good word. I like that word. Welcome, Ian. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You've been doing and founded Moxie Bookkeeping a long time ago, 2003, and coaching. And you do creative stuff also for nonprofits. So yeah, I've been helping out actually 3 or 4 nonprofits. I'm in one in San Jose, California, for disabled adults. My son years ago had cerebral palsy, and so I was very passionate about helping out where I could there. And as you heard me say, we help build schools in Kenya for all kinds of kids. So we're very pleased
Yeah.
to. I'm passionate about education, and you're in the education business really with what you do. I looked at your website, I looked at some of your videos, and you are on track here, girl.
Well, when I was very little, I wanted to be a teacher, and then I made the mistake of doing my college senior internship at a public school in New York City, and that changed my mind. I realized that I did not have the moral character, the moral fiber to withstand all of the stress that these poor children were put through. And I was like, I think I need to go find a different way to do this. And
yeah, what age group were you teaching?
high school.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Yeah.
When I was a junior high school boy, I was the worst in terms of motor mouth. And so I totally get that. Are you from a New York area or no?
No, I lived in Brooklyn for 30 years. I actually grew up on the peninsula in the Bay Area. I actually grew up on Stanford campus while my mom was going to school, and moved back east to go to school, loved it, stayed there for 30 years, and then found myself aging out, I guess is really the most honest way to say it. I went from being the one enjoying the roof parties to being the one cursing roof parties. And I thought, well, it's probably time to me to move back to a slower lifestyle. So I returned home to Northern California. I actually live in a tiny little town called Grass Valley, 3 acres, and I just love it.
Yeah, I have a real estate friend from Palo Alto actually that has a house in Grass Valley, and we did a little church group golf tournament. He got us lined up with some courses right around there. It's a beautiful area, obviously, as you know. So I grew up in upstate New York, Rochester, New York. So I'm from way out in farm country out that way, which was another pretty area. Let's talk about business. That's why you're here. So what's the difference between an accountant, a bookkeeper, and a CPA?
Yes. So accountant is kind of the catch-all word. It's what I think of like as saying someone's a doctor. Well, does that mean they're a doctor of philosophy or an ear, nose, throat guy? So accounting really encompasses the whole thing. It's just tracking the financial stuff. And so within accounting, there's all sorts of different kinds of accounting. And bookkeeping really focuses on recording the day-to-day transactions of what actually happened. And then that ideally gets reviewed by a full charge bookkeeper or a controller. And then that would ideally go up to a CFO, and then the CFO would present it to the CEO, and they would all discuss and then talk to the CPA. That's not the way small business works. It's you, your bookkeeper, and your tax accountant. So accounting becomes very squishy, and people play different roles. So I think the reason that it's important to know the distinctions is to be clear on where everyone's job stops. And unfortunately, whether you're talking about the tax accountant, which could be an enrolled agent or an EA or a certified public accountant, a CPA, their job is really about compliance and helping you pay the least amount of tax legally possible. Bookkeeper is really about making sure that the books are right. And the poor business owner is left in the middle saying, I just want to know what I can afford. I just want to know, can I afford to start a new product line? Change offices, hire an assistant, hire a project manager. And neither of those positions are ideally suited to answer that question. So that really is the role of a CFO, but most CFOs are sort of large corporate. And so again, if you're a small business, they won't really necessarily have the information that you need. And that's where I step in. And that's why we're bookkeeping and coaching.
Yes. I notice you have some very interesting courses and training kinds of things available, which is really cool because just like you said, I've owned a couple of franchises myself. And, I actually bought a franchise. It was actually a Service Master cleaning company franchise. I inherited 13 or 14 employees and a book of business. And I bought it from the guy because he was burnt out. And then after I bought the business, I realized why he's burnt out. And so at that time, I couldn't afford an accountant or an attorney or anything. I did hire a payroll service to at least take care of the quarterlies and the checks and stuff. I've been self-employed with a lot of different things for many, many years. There is a kind of a void of available information about what do I do and where do I go? Where do I turn? How can I keep things afloat? But I hear what you're saying is you figured out a way to make it available. That's very cool.
Yeah. And I wish I could take credit for it. But I actually adopted a system called Profit First by a book called Profit First, written by a gentleman named Mike McAllowitz, who lives in New Jersey. And he sort of repackaged a very common sense idea, which is, grandma's envelope system. Dave Ramsey uses it. A lot of people, if you listen to financial people, they almost all say kind of the same thing. Know what your spending habits are, know how to optimize those, and set aside percentages of your income so that you know everything is covered. And I think that's super sound advice. The piece that was always sort of missing for me as a business owner was, okay, how and how much? And so I think what the great favor that Mike has done all of us is to say, here's the chart. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's like the off the rack size based on the size of your business to just help you think about where you should be, how much your profit percentage, how much your owner's pay should be. And then you get to customize it to fit you.
I get it. What if you have somebody that says, hey, look, I just hate bookkeeping. I hate numbers. My tax guy handles all. Why should I bother?
That is a great question. And I obviously am going to have a very biased response because I'm a bookkeeper. But also as a small business owner, I think the thing for me around that is what a missed opportunity. So when we talk about the different kinds of accounting, one kind of accounting is management accounting, which is if you're content, if you're, not growing much or shrinking much, and you don't really feel like planning for the future, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that, but that's just me, then maybe your tax person can handle it. What I saw, however, was that when we were hit with an unusual circumstance, such as a global pandemic, that the people who had thought about it ahead of time and made a plan were able to weather that stress with much more ease and many more resources. And so not only did none of our clients that were using Profit First go out of business, but they also didn't call me in tears in the first month. With many, many of our clients, even the ones who survived and did okay, were like really stressed out there for a bit.
Oh, yeah. I have a friend here who had a very large company in California, and he had a lot of equipment involved in maintenance of shopping malls. And we helped him return a ton of rental vehicles in one day, and just a massive shift on just trying to stay afloat. Fortunately, by the end of last year, he actually was able to keep most all of his employees and keep moving forward. But what a scary time to just be faced with things that we've never had to face before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that a lot of business owners they're not really aware of how scary the statistics are, even during quote unquote normal times. I think a lot of small businesses kind of hear the statistic from the SBA, the Small Business Administration, that most businesses don't make it. 50% during the first 3 to 5 years, 70% don't make it to 10 years. But what doesn't get explained about that is that of the businesses that go out, 82% of them say it was cash flow. That it wasn't that they weren't earning, or that they didn't have proof of concept, or that, they didn't have ready, willing customers. It was that they couldn't manage the balance between their inflow and their outflow, and they didn't have the money available when they needed it. Sometimes that's the collection cycle. Sometimes that's pricing. Sometimes that's expenses. Sometimes it's all of the above. But really knowing that that is the crucial thing that business owners need to get comfortable with, whether or not they're comfortable with numbers and spreadsheets, really helps people zero in on, okay, great, show me what I need to know and let me go do that.
And I know lots of people that just cringe at trying to meet payroll, and they'll put it on a credit card or something. But to your point, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of people just have this great idea, and there's nothing wrong with great ideas. I think I want to start my own business, and yet they don't have any training in collections, which is kind of important, and things like that. They come into it, kind of, I don't want to use the word half-cocked, but I just used it. So,
yeah, I mean, the vast majority, almost 100% of businesses are started by people who love what they do, not by people who know how to run a business. And even some of the traditional information sources, MBAs, accounting degrees, don't answer the question, how do I successfully manage a small business? And how much of my time should be spent on revenue producing versus administrative? How do I handle this? When is the right time to make all of these different decisions? And my heart breaks for people that try and do it on their own, because there's so many good free resources out there. And it's, it will really help push you forward if you have the time and money to invest in an expert to help get you where you need to go. Because a lot of people end up feeling like, oh, maybe this is just, or burning themselves out, or borrowing against their own personal financial futures and retiring with nothing, or not getting paid because their business is growing too fast. And, small business is the backbone of this country. When small businesses do well, our neighborhoods flourish and things are good. We've seen in small town USA, when the large, mill closes, it devastates the economy. And only if small local businesses can really step in does recovery happen. So I have this very deep desire to make sure that anyone who wants to be their own business has the support that they deserve around that.
Yeah, I've lived through and lived to tell about it, several recessions in my lifetime, and as well as a mill town where the mill was a big Burlington mill, and they went out because all of that business went elsewhere, somewhere else. So you work with a little bit with nonprofits. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that again is just part of my own personal value system. I really strongly believe in being of service. And I think that I really enjoy people who love what they do. And it's harder to find people who love what they do more than nonprofits. So we really, again, like to support those people who are doing beautiful things in the world, whether it's creating art or cleaning malls or, building schools that whether it's for profit or nonprofit. I just really like to see people succeed, and nonprofits also have a lot of challenges because they're some of the most complicated financials that there are. And if they're getting government grants, the reporting requirements are so complex, and often they have less to work with than others. Not always. And that's also one of the things that I say to my for-profits as often as my nonprofits. Nonprofit doesn't mean non-income. It means that the profit that they generate goes to serve the mission, not the shareholders. But a nonprofit should be profitable. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable.
Exactly. I understand that. So you do QuickBooks, Pro Advisor, as well as the business coach stuff. What do we need to know that I can communicate with my audience that would help them to get the big picture? Let's say it that way.
Yeah. So I started as a bookkeeper. I've always worked in small business, and we've sort of layered on services as I've grown into better understanding of what the questions of small businesses are. That was, again, how we got the AND coaching. So I work with both QuickBooks and Xero as an expert. I can help with other software. There's so many out there, Wave, FreshBooks, all sorts of things. So I can talk about the structure of it. I actually love working with people who either already have a bookkeeper or are their own bookkeeper, that we sort of live in that controller level to really help you say, what am I doing right? What do I need to improve on? How do I get the result that I'm looking for so that you don't have to get an accounting degree? I like to think of it as traveling overseas. We want you to be able to order a nice meal, a nice glass of wine, and find the hotel. You don't need to be able to conjugate the pluperfect subjunctive. That's my job. I'm the interpreter. So just letting business owners feel empowered around the financial decisions and what do they need to pay attention to and what can they let go of, and help them get that larger picture, and then ideally help them implement the profit first system so that they always have that guaranteed permanent profitability and they don't accidentally overspend or accidentally fall into debt. Yeah, we work with boards and show up at board meetings sometimes. So we're happy to do training in the software or with Profit First. And we've got a group program called Abundantly Clear for those who don't like spreadsheets or just know that it's not the best use of their time.
Let me ask you this, Ian, if I may. If you could have dinner with anybody in the world, dead or alive, that inspired you over the years, just anybody that comes to mind that, man, if I could just have dinner and just, sit down and talk with them, who would that be?
Well, that's easy because it would be my aunt. She passed away when I was still pretty young, but she was one of the beacons of light in my early years. She was just an amazing woman. Her sister, my grandmother, who outlived her by a couple of decades, was also a really wonderful, amazing woman. But my aunt helped take care of me and my sister while my parents were at work. So I just feel super close to her, and I would do just about anything to get another dinner with her.
I particularly like the homemade molasses cookies my grandmother made. I can smell them. So what did your parents do for a living? Speaking of parents.
Yeah, my father's a jazz musician, which is, he actually works at the Stanford Jazz Workshop in the summer. So you may see him tooting around town and has his own, combos until then. He's had a band for the last 51 years. They're celebrating their 51st anniversary called the Natural Gas Traditional Jazz Band. They play up in Fairfax all the time. They're a hoot. And my mother is a retired pediatrician who used to work in Palo Alto at her own private practice. So wow. They are both very entrepreneurial themselves, very creative. It's how I ended up with loving creatives and creative thinkers, and and how I recognize the ability to decide your own financial future and have control of that makes a huge impact.
Well, one of my favorite careers of the many different things that I've done is I worked at 10 different radio stations because of my love for music. So I've gotten to see some pretty famous jazz musicians and some rock and roll people and even contemporary Christian music when it first came out, all different kinds of stuff, worked at a big band station. But now it's all online, right? So, and plus I was a talk show host at a couple of stations. So this is what I really enjoy doing is meeting people, interacting, getting to know you better. And speaking of pediatricians, a prime example of what you said about MBAs, just for example, is I happen to know personally several physicians who they're expert as being a physician, but they're not necessarily taught how to run their doctor's office. What do you say to that?
It's a learnable skill. That's what I would say. It's all a learnable skill. I was not born a bookkeeper. I found out that I had a proficiency for it and that I enjoyed it. And thankfully that made it very easy to have a career in it. But when I graduated college, I had a liberal arts degree, and who knew what I was going to do at the time? So, I think being clear on what your values are, what your strengths are, and that makes it easy to delegate the other stuff, and find people that you enjoy working with who can really help support you rather than tell you what you should be doing, which.
Right. We've had enough of that. Thank you very much. I'm speaking with Ean Price Murphy. She is an amazing accountant, bookkeeper, coach, and everything you could ever imagine from somebody living in the Grass Valley, Sacramento area. How can I help you? You have a website that I can send people to contact you and get in touch and find out how they can connect and get involved with some of these trainings. I looked at that list. They're really cool.
Good. I'm glad you liked them. Yeah, our website is our hub. It is www.moxiebookkeeping.com, which is moxiebookkeeping.com. That's a Jeopardy question, the only word in the English language with 3 doubles. From there, you can find all of the information. We have a free Facebook group. We're on, LinkedIn and Insta. We're all over the place. But really, the website is where I like to think of as home, and that should have all of our services and pricing on it.
How did you come up with that name, Moxie?
We were named by a client,
really?
Which is awesome. Yeah, it was when I was hiring my first employee in 2003. I had just been a freelancer before that, and I was like, I don't want to call the business after my own name.
Right.
And he said, you got to be named Moxie. I was like, that's perfect. So that was it.
Very cool. I like it. It's very memorable for sure. And before we get going here, I want to thank you, first of all, for being here. But last question, and we both got busy schedules and busy lives to keep on moving forward, do some other stuff as well. So having said that, what was your very first job ever when you were a kid?
My very first job ever was working in my mother's doctor's office, rolling Q-tips. We would hand make Q-tips for the office so that they would be baby sized. Yep, that was my very first job ever.
That is so cool. And how old do you say you were back then, maybe?
Oh, I was probably 9 or 10. She got us to work. She was actually born in Bakersfield, California, but her family is from the Midwest. So, as soon as you can, you start working. Nobody sits around doing nothing in my family.
Rolling Q-tips. I have not heard the rolling Q-tips one. That's really cool. Very different, very unique. So you are a very unique and interesting person. And I'm really grateful that you could talk with me today. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime. In fact, I have a referral for you when we get off line here that I want you to connect with somebody that I know in Palo Alto, actually. So thank you, Ean Price Murphy, for being here. Thanks for being my guest today. The price is right.
Thank you.